Welcome back to Broadcast Booth Stories from inside the headsets of Play-by-Play. I'm Brian Jensen, your host of the podcast, and, well, I got to admit that I've taken a little bit of time off, had a bit of a hiatus from the podcast for a variety of reasons, but one of them had some great guests to get started here on our first 11 episodes, including Vern Lundquist, Brad Sham, Chuck Cooperstein, but I wanted to stretch it a little further. I had a lot of college football play-by-play guys as well, some of the great ones from around the country, Craig Way, Toby Rowland, etc. But as you can kind of tell by what I'm talking about, they're very regionalized in what we had covered to start out with. So I thought, take a little break, look around the country, decide what topic you want to start back with in play-by-play. And with the NBA season, it just seemed right to go with an NBA star from the play-by-play world. And if you're going to go to a star in sports and in broadcasting, why not go to L.A.? Seems perfect to me. John Ireland, the play-by-play voice, the radio play-by-play voice of the Los Angeles Lakers, is our guest. And, you know, before we get him on here completely, I want to talk a little bit about our background, because our background is one that has crossed paths over the years. Well, actually, many years ago. John,
Yep.
Thanks for joining me today on this podcast. And how many years has it been?
You and I met in 1986 when we were both in Beaumont, Texas. You were the sports anchor at the CBS affiliate, and I was the sports anchor at the ABC affiliate. And
Yes.
First of all, before we get into our backgrounds, I can't believe you're making me follow that list. I'm following Vern Lundquist and Chuck Cooperstein. You threw me under the bus right from the. We're old friends, so it's okay. But man, I'm digressing here. But one time Brian was at an award show out here, and I won some award for like best radio talk show host. And by the time they got to me, the award right before me was best TV play-by-play, and the guy goes, "The winner is Vin Scully," and Scully gets up and gives a speech. I'll give you the 30-second highlight of it was, every year I look at the ballot when I get this thing and all the great names, and I'm honored to be here, and then I vote for myself. And the whole room just cracks up, and then, okay, on to the next award, and the winner is John Ireland. And I walked up to the podium and I said, if you think I'm going to follow Vin Scully, you got another thing coming. And I went and sat down. So you've put me in a spotlight following guys like Vern and Chuck, but happy to be here and great to see you. I don't know when the last time we actually saw each other, even Zoom face to face. It's been many years, but back then we were both in the same small town. And the thing I remember most of all was you really wanted to get to Dallas. I really wanted to get to
Yes.
LA, and our buddy Jeff Phelps really wanted to get to his hometown, which is Cleveland. And all three of those things happened, which I thought was really cool, that all of us kind of had this dream of getting to work in what we considered to be our hometowns, and it happened for all three of us.
Interesting, though. I'm going to throw myself under the bus, okay? So we'll be even on this deal.
Yeah.
So you made your dream, and, man, what a great career. Again, the radio play-by-play voice of the Lakers now for how many? You started in, what, 2011 in that particular role?
I was the guy for 10, and this is my 11th year doing it, yeah.
Wow. And then Jeff doing some great, full-time radio in Cleveland. He's the pregame, postgame host on several of the sports shows, broadcasts as well. And I did, let's see. After 10 years at WFAA Channel 8, the ABC affiliate here, started doing real estate. Commercial real estate marketing communications. I'm about to start a gig in banking marketing communications. And, oh, by the way, I still do the play-by-play gig on the side on the weekends now. I mean, it is my number one passion still to this day. And I appreciate you bringing that up because, doing tech football has just been a blast.
No matter what banking or real estate avenues you go, and I wish you well in both, to me, you will always be a sportscaster. And by the way, I think we'll eventually get to this, but weird side track here. You, Brian Jensen, are the first person who ever started me in fantasy football. We had a fantasy football league in 1986, 87. I'd never played before. I didn't even know what it was. You said, hey, do you want to try it? I got a league. You know everybody in the league. And I said, sure. And you got me hooked. And I think I've played every year since you first invited me to play fantasy football in the mid to late 80s. So you are directly responsible for that passion of mine.
Okay, so quick question on that. Have you done well enough of late to actually make it a money-making passion, or are you still kind of like it was in those first few years or so?
Yeah, no. In the first years when I played with you, I was definitely the rookie, and I got kicked around pretty good. But you guys were well seasoned, and I was the newbie. But yeah, we pay top 5 spots in the league I play. I play in a league called the Hollywood Football League, which is all agents and writers and guys who work on movies and
Cool.
nobody you've ever heard of. It's all the people behind the scenes. But my radio partner Steve Mason and I have been in the same league for 20 plus years. His nickname is Last Place Mace because he's finished last 4 out of 5 years. But I'm normally able to crack the top 5. I've only won it once. But if you crack the top 5, you pay for what you put into it and make a little money on the side. And I see you got a picture of Mace there. But Brian, this year he was so worried about finishing last again. He says if he finishes last this year, he will shave one eyebrow. One.
Oh,
that's it. And he's after 5 weeks, he just won 55-54 this weekend, but he's 1-4 and tied for last place. So we're all rooting against him to shave one eyebrow.
Oh, that'll be fun. But he's on radio, so how does he? But I'm guessing and hoping that he does enough. I guess in LA you do just about everything media wise anyway, don't you?
Right. Yeah, and he's so vain that I mean anything he does. He posts on he's one of those guys that posts anything he does on Instagram. If he's cooking dinner, he'll go post that on Instagram. So it would be a blow to his ego for sure.
So now I'm curious. Last question about Beaumont and the early days, because I wasn't positive back in those days that play-by-play was the direction you wanted to go. I was fortunate enough to, do some play-by-play while I was there. The station I worked at did Beaumont Golden Gator baseball, which, by the way, they had some great players back in those days. It
was a Padres affiliate.
It was the Padres affiliate. That's exactly right. And man, they had some great players. Let's see, Ozzie Guillen was there. Joey Cora was there. Anyway, we won't go down that whole list. But the Lamar Cardinal basketball, I did Lamar Cardinal basketball, and then high school stuff. And I did not realize, because you were basically we had the station kind of had control of that, like you do in a local market. Sure. When did the play-by-play bug hit you?
Always had it, Brian. I don't know if I probably never shared it with you, but I was that kid who turned the sound down on the TV, so my parents had to put up with me announcing games as a kid, and I always wanted to do it. And as you remember, when we were starting out, if you wanted to be a sportscaster, really one of the only ways you could make a living was how we did it. You went to work for a TV news station, and they would pay you to be a sportscaster, and then you hoped you would get some play-by-play opportunities. So that started to happen for me. I was the sports director of the UCLA campus station when I was in college. I did play-by-play of all the basketball and football games there. And when Beaumont was my second stop. I started in Monroe, Louisiana, and then caught up with you in Beaumont. My third stop was in San Diego. And when I got there, I had an opportunity to start doing play-by-play again. I did some San Diego State stuff. I did some high school games and some select, things that people asked me to do. And by the time I got to Los Angeles, I began being like kind of the fill-in guy, because all the sportscasters in LA have side gigs. So if the Clipper announcer or the Laker announcer or the UCLA announcer needed a weekend off or needed to miss a game, I kind of became the, in case of emergency, break glass play-by-play guy.
Yeah.
And that led to, I got the Clipper job for 4 years in the late 90s. And when the Laker job opened up, I applied for it then, didn't get it, but they liked it. They liked my work. And they said, look, we'll keep you in mind. We'll keep you in your role of being kind of a pinch hitter. And when it opened up again 5 years later, I got it.
And this is something that now, as you mentioned earlier, you've done it for quite a few years now, and you've had great experiences, and we're going to get into some of those, because I think, it's hard for people to realize, especially if you just watch a team and don't really understand what's going on behind it, the experiences that you guys as play-by-play guys feel and experience as well. I mean, I do it too with tech, although we haven't been to the championship level yet since I've been doing broadcasts, and I certainly hope we get there one day. But championship level broadcasting has got to be just a different level of excitement and professionalism than everything else.
I got spoiled early, Brian, because I got to Los Angeles the same year they drafted Kobe and traded for Shaq. And so throughout my run in Los Angeles, I spent 10 years as a sideline guy. This is my 11th year as a play-by-play guy. I've been to the NBA Finals 8 times. And, there are colleagues of mine that have never even been to the conference finals. So I was incredibly lucky and kind of spoiled that I ended up getting to LA at the time when Phil Jackson, Shaq, and Kobe all kind of came together. And it's a different, like if you talk to Chuck Cooperstein, he'll tell you he's, been to the finals twice and got to call the championship when the Mavs ran the table in 2011. And when you do it, when you go to the finals and you go through that experience, you think, well, I'll be back next year. But it rarely works that way. When we had Kobe, we were going pretty regularly, but you never know when the merry-go-round's going to stop. So I was pretty happy and lucky that I got to do that at, as you say, the championship level.
Well, I'm going to jump right in now. You've brought up the name that obviously is the name of your tenure, and that's Kobe Bryant. I mean, talk a little bit about just the access that you had with him and how much his imprint on you over those years will stay with you.
It is if we ever meet up in person and we have a couple of beers, I could tell Kobe stories for 2 or 3 hours. Again, my timing was lucky because I got here at the same time he did, and at one point, he and I are my first son. I only have one, my son, Jack, who's 19 now, and his oldest, Gianna, is 19. They were basically born a couple of months apart. So we kind of bonded over the fact that neither one of our wives were sleeping much because, they were dealing with managing a baby. And early in this tenure, I said, he goes, man, Vanessa, my wife, can't even take a shower. This baby just clings to her. And I said, hey, try this. Somebody gave me this and you should try it. And I gave him a baby Einstein video. I don't know if you ever.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
But it bought Kobe and his wife 20 minutes of peace. And I saw him a couple of days later. I said, did it work? He goes, not only did it work, I went out and bought the other 15 of them. And, after that, we kind of bonded at the parent level. And he took care of me, Brian, for a lot of years. When he was done doing interviews or he was walking out, if he knew I needed him or if I had a technical problem or if I needed anything, he would make sure that I was taken care of. I kind of became one of his guys. And so for that reason, I had a front row seat to everything that he did for those 20 years he was with the Lakers. And people ask me all the time, I've been to 8 finals. What's my favorite game? I know you've got some clips of it. My favorite game that I've ever done was Kobe's final game, which was on a 19-win Laker team. The team was terrible.
And the lead for Utah is 10. Kobe will bring it up for the Lakers. 3:15 to go in his career. Kobe dribbling left. One-on-one against Gordon Hayward. Kobe spins away from Hayward, got to the rim, elevates, lay it up, and in! 47 for Kobe.
It'll never be duplicated. He dropped 60 points on his way out. And you think about the way, you guys had Dirk in Texas for all those years, and Dirk was great right up until the very end.
Yeah.
Dirk had a lot of 40, 50-point nights, but to drop 60 on the final night of your career, I don't think is ever going to happen.
Kobe has the ball. Lakers trail by 1. Kobe dribbling left, around a pick from Randall. Pulls up. 2-pointer. Good! 58 for Bryant. The Lakers lead by 1. If I wasn't sitting here, I wouldn't believe it. This is like out of a movie. If I turned this in for a script, no one would believe it.
It was as crazy of a night. Like in LA, Brian, it's a see and be seen town because, I joke that I'm a class D celebrity in this town. You've got the movie actors, then you got the TV people, then you've got, everybody else. And we are somewhere at the bottom. But on that night, all the A-listers showed up. It was really unbelievable. And he put on an incredible show. And, over the years, I just got a chance to kind of see life from what it was like from the inside for him. So he'll go down as my favorite player of all time. Obviously it was a complete shock when he died, and we're still not over it out here. It was like this bright light in LA that, in a town full of stars, he was the brightest one. So I've got enough distance from it now where I look back and consider myself incredibly lucky to have had any relationship with him. Brian, if you walk through my house in Southern California, you wouldn't know I'm a sportscaster. I'm not a memorabilia guy. I've never been that. But the only thing I have up around my house are things that are related to Kobe. Stuff where, he would have signed something and gave it to me. I emceed a book party for him, and he wrote a thing to me in his book, and he would throw me his shoes that I could put in my kids' auction, and he'd sign them for me. And so I call that my Irish luck. Just happened to get me here the year he got here, and I got to enjoy the whole ride.
So, I'm not much of a memorabilia guy either. I don't have any in my studio. Yeah, this is my house, and so
very
let's
impressive.
As you know, I never did the weather in Beaumont, so I probably turned the wrong way here. I did do it in Lubbock one day when I was there, but so on some of the Cubbies over here, I've got
there's Dirk.
There's a Nowitzki jersey, and I've got some Masters hats over here, a lot of golf stuff, and then tech stuff, and Troy Aikman's his rookie helmet is over here in one of the Cubbies over here. So it's but kind of the same thing. One of the things I think that's so great about being in the broadcast world in sports is that you do develop relationships with the players over time. And when I was working in the television sports side of things here in Dallas, it was also in a very positive, fortunate time to be a sportscaster, because that's when the Cowboys were making their runs through the Super Bowls of the 90s. And with Aikman and Irvin and Emmett and all the great players that they had, and so they would do a lot of those same things. I would bring my son into the locker room, and the next thing they'd be signing a jersey or shoes, like you mentioned. I got Darryl Johnson's shoes over there, and hand them to you. So that's always really a cool thing. So I have kind of built a little bit of that and handed it down to the kids, and hopefully one day we'll be able to hand it down to the grandkids and such. But no, it's really some cool stuff.
Yeah, I enjoyed those years, and there's just so many weird stories about Kobe. I'll tell you one you'll enjoy. That one year we're in Houston and we're working a playoff series, and the Lakers eliminate the Rockets, and I had to stay, and something you had to do a lot. I had to stay and do live shots after the game for a couple hours for the newscasts. And I get back to the hotel, and our whole traveling party, including the players, are in the bar. They're celebrating because the series is over. We don't have a plane to go home till the next day, so everybody's blowing off steam. And Kobe mentions over to me, he says, "Hey, you want a beer?" And I said, "Kobe, you don't need to buy me a beer. I'm fine." And he kind of smirks and he points down, and I look at his feet, and Brian, there are probably 25 full open beers. And I realized then that people see him in public and they say to him, "I've always wanted to buy you a beer." And they go to the bartender, and the bartender opens the beer, and they hand it to Kobe, and Kobe says, "Thank you very much." And by the end of the night, he would have 20 beers that he was never going to drink. And I said to him, "Oh, well, if that's the case, I'm happy to take one." He goes, "Yeah, and tell your crew to come over here. I'll never touch all these." So he was just in a completely different stratosphere than you or I would ever be in.
Of course.
You and I were at bars in public for years. I think we can count the amount of times people bought us beers on one hand. It happened to him like 20-fold every day.
That is hilarious. So yeah, it's, hey, anybody else want to swing over here? Because they're
Right.
going to get hot pretty quick.
Right.
So yeah, the Kobe stories are great. I'm curious about some of the other celebrities too. You brought it up, and
Yeah.
I think when people watch LA sports in general, but certainly Laker games more than any other, the celebrity watch is part of it. And right there at courtside, you always see some of the A-listers. Just throw out a couple of moments, or maybe somebody that, because you see them all the time, maybe wowed
Sure.
you a little bit, or something of that nature.
Well, I'll tell you that in that vein, remember that after Kobe blew out his Achilles, we went through some pretty lean years where the Lakers were
Oh, yeah.
out of the playoffs for 5 years. So on the radio side, we created something called the third chair, where in the middle of the second quarter, we would get some celebrity out of the crowd. I think you showed a picture a little earlier. There it is again. That's George Lopez, who's a big Laker fan. And basically, so Lopez would come. That's Michael Thompson, my partner, Clay's dad, who is sitting next to me. And we would bring a celebrity up, like George is sitting there, and he would call the game with us from about the
Fun.
9-minute mark to the 3-minute mark. We'd keep them real time about 20, 25 minutes. And we did this, Brian, for 4 years, maybe 5, just as a distraction to how bad the Lakers were. And we were surprised how many people we got to do it. And the two people that drew the biggest kind of reaction, because you can see by that shot, we sit in the middle of the stands, were Justin Bieber at the height of his popularity. To the point, Brian, where people were turning around with their camera phones and they stopped watching the game. And then going a little farther back, do you remember that Dennis Rodman had a cup of coffee with the Lakers? He was on the team
Yes,
for less than a year, very briefly. And he was married to Carmen Electra.
Yes.
And one year we put Carmen next to Michael and I, and so many people came over to take her picture that the ushers made us get rid of her because it was a fire hazard. But she was dressed in some like skin tight leather outfit, and everybody recognized that she was now in the media section. And so we've had everybody up there from Jack Black to Kevin Hart to, Diane Cannon to Andy Garcia, and Dustin Hoffman's been up there. It's been kind of a cool perk to get these celebrity Laker fans.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier Kobe's finale. That's the only time we've got Jack Nicholson. Jack says no to everything. But on that night, I had my producer, Greg Bergman, with a wireless headset and a wireless microphone, and he was just running around Staples Center because it was going to be Kobe's last game, and he would say, "John, I've got Snoop Dogg for you." And Snoop put on the headset and talk in the mic, and so he just walked up to Nicholson and said, "Hey, Jack, would you talk to John and Michael for Kobe's last game?" And he said, "Sure." And we got Jack for a couple of minutes, but
That's
it is
awesome.
Have you ever been to a Laker game in person?
Yes, actually, I covered the Mavericks when I first got to Dallas, and they were playing when the Derek Harper situation, as you might recall,
Right.
in the playoffs. They went 7, and I went
they
to
almost
LA
beat us.
to right. I went to LA to cover those games. So yes,
So
yes.
there's a game within a game at those things, and one of the reasons
Yes.
why they used to turn the lights down at the Forum, which is where you were when the Mavs took us 7. That was
yes,
the 1988 season.
yes,
They turned the lights down finally because so many people were stargazing at the Forum that they weren't paying attention to the game. Now, when Staples Center was born in '99, they left the house lights up a little bit, and it became part of the experience. And that was Dr. Jerry Buss, who, Brian, for my money, was his daughter Jeannie runs our team now, but Dr. Buss was the smartest owner I've ever met.
Yeah.
And I could go down the road with him, but I remember originally he said, "I'm going to put chairs on the courtside seats," and the NBA and David Stern said, no, that's a safety hazard. You can't do it. He said, "I'm doing it anyway." He goes, "I'm going to put dancing girls on the court. I'm going to make it like a Las Vegas show." And David Stern said, no, you're not going to cheapen our product by putting dancers on the court. And Dr. Buss said, "I'm doing it anyway." And after a while, now everybody has courtside seats and everybody has a dance team. And and that was Dr. Buss. He realized that you could go to a basketball game anywhere, but there was only one Laker game, and he turned the Laker games into an event.
Yep.
And that has lived on to this day. He's the reason why the Lakers can charge so much for tickets, why guys like Michael and I make a lot of money. I mean, it is he developed this product where people, I could offer you, Brian, if you were living out here, I could offer you tickets to a Clipper game and you'd go, I might go. Clippers are good now. But if I offered you tickets to a Laker game, you would cancel what you were doing and go to the Laker game, because some people only get to go one or two times.
Yes,
and it's really a fun part of living in LA, is being able to go to Laker games in person.
Well, and I recall that Laker series. One of the really highlights of off the court activity was walking down underneath, heading onto the floor to find out where I was going to be, watching the game. And Rob Lowe, it was back in those days. Rob Lowe was the A-lister that we kind of had to wait for as he was coming through the hall with his entourage. And it was just, not being from L.A., you're kind of starstruck at that moment. It was early on in my days in Dallas, and so hadn't really seen a lot of celebrities out of Beaumont.
Right.
So that was one. But I'll tell you, the one for me, the one that I've always wanted to do something with, George W. Bush was the managing partner of the Rangers for a while I was a television guy in Dallas, and got to befriend him, and he took a couple of golf outings with him, a couple of snapshots with him that were really cool. He introduced me to his father, 41, at camp one day. But the one thing I've always wanted to do with him, or have him do with us, is do what you did with that third seat. Have him come into a booth. And the reason that I keep thinking of it, he says he has always wanted to do that, right? And he sent me a letter from the White House, which completely shocked me when it showed up on the front, in my mailbox, because it had the White House as the return address. And I'm like, oh, what the heck is this? Well, I open it up. It's a letter from the president, and he was congratulating me on doing what I love to do with the school that I went to school with. And, he had happened to catch an article that was in the Dallas Morning News about my broadcasting, and it just completely shocked me, number one. But he talked a little bit about, the passion of doing sports and broadcasting. I thought, man. And so I tried early on when he was out of his presidency to try to track him down and get him an invitation, and just never have connected. But I think that would be so fun if the next time we do a game in Dallas. I think he would too.
If you were just talking baseball, he would absolutely do it. There's a famous story out here. It's winding down now, but Ellen DeGeneres has a talk show here, and it's been on for 20 years. And she, for a long time, really, really wanted George Clooney, and she couldn't get him. Clooney doesn't do a lot of those TV talk shows, so she was yelling at her staff to, I don't care what it takes, somehow get me George Clooney. And one of her staff reached out to one of Clooney's friends and said, what could I possibly do to get George? And this friend of Clooney said, short of you getting Johnny Bench and Joe Morgan to show up in her studio, you're never getting him. So she did it. She went and got Johnny Bench and Joe Morgan. George Clooney was a kid growing up in Cincinnati, and his dad was a newscaster, did what we used to do. His dad, Nick, was a news guy. And so George's favorite teams were the Big Red Machine. And so Ellen went and got those guys, got Johnny Bench and Joe Morgan, flew them out to her show, surprised Clooney with them, and that's how she was able to get Clooney. So those, like even George W. Bush, even somebody that high on the celebrity chain, they love to talk sports. You get those guys talking sports, and they feel like, like they're a kid. They love doing that stuff. So I bet you President Bush would do it if he happened to be at the game and maybe he was just with friends and not with his family. I bet you could, get him to do an inning, or if you see him at a Tech game, he might come up and do a visit with you in the booth. You never know. So
now, got to shift gears a little bit, because I want to ask you a question about your um, let's see, mentor maybe. I'm not quite sure if that's the right word or if it's just the person that you respected most in the seat that you're now in. I've got a picture of you in, obviously your headset, broadcasting, those types of things. The guy that wore the headset and sat in the seat on the side of the court before you, a couple before you, I guess, was Chick Hearn. And I've heard you say some things that I really admire about Chick Hearn's and just your thoughts about it. What does that mean to you?
Thank you for bringing it up. It's my favorite thing to talk about. Chick was great to me before he died. He heard me doing Clipper games, and he called me over one day, and he said, Marge and I were driving home. We heard you doing the game. You have a great natural enthusiasm. I'm going to give you 2 tips. And I'm like, what? Yes. I'm like, right, He said, number 1, no one has ever been criticized in the history of our business for giving the score too much. You live in Los Angeles. We have 15 million people here. He said, get in the habit of resetting with the score. And Brian, if you hear me do a game, I do it ad nauseum. And Chick was right. No one has ever, particularly in basketball, where the score is changing every 15 to 30 seconds. No one has ever criticized me for it. And some people have been complimentary of it, where I'll say 20 to 18 Lakers. Here comes LeBron James bringing the ball up. Lakers lead by 2. James buries a jumper from the corner. It's a 4-point Laker lead, 22-18. Well, I just gave the score 4 times in 10 seconds. And you are shocked how many people say it's the number one complaint they have of play-by-play guys, that they'll tune into a game, and it can be a baseball game, a football game, a basketball game. They'll be stuck in traffic. And in Los Angeles, everybody's stuck in traffic. We've never fixed the problem out here.
Yes.
And so you can, that's one thing Chick beat into me that I give him full credit for is I give the score a lot. I would say probably too much, but he convinced me there never is too much. And the other thing he did was he gave us license to tell the truth. He was honest with the audience. If the Lakers were playing horribly, he said it. If a guy made a terrible pass, he said it. And because he said it and he set the standard, it gave the rest of us, everybody who's followed him. And, Brian, believe it or not, I'm the 4th guy to follow Chick, but everybody considers it Chick's chair. There was a guy named Paul Sunderland, then Joel Myers, then Spiro Ditas, then me. And all of us, Chick gave us the license to be completely honest. And I don't know if this will make sense, but there is a comfort in being the Laker play-by-play guy in knowing that you will never, ever even be considered the best to ever do it. There's a statue of the guy outside the building. The Staples Center is, and I'm not making this up, Staples Center is on Chick Hearn Drive. They named the street after it. So everybody knows Chick. Everybody knows what he meant to the organization. And as Bill McDonald, who's our TV guy, and Bill and I grew up together. We've known each other for a long time. We often joke it's our job not to dishonor Chick's chair, but that will always be Chick's chair. It was long before I got in it. It will be long after I get out of it. And Brian, I'm not ashamed to admit, go down the rabbit hole of typing into YouTube. And I would encourage anybody who's watching this podcast to do this. Type Chick Hearn into a YouTube search. And if you're anything like me, you'll come back up for air about an hour later. He's just the best basketball announcer that ever lived. And I'll tell you one, I know you've touched on the subject that I ramble on forever.
That's great.
But I'll end it with this. When I was a kid, and I still have this problem today, I had trouble sleeping. I've never been somebody that sleeps a lot. I sleep 4 or 5 hours a night, even to this day. Well, my parents, because I was in high school and middle school at that time, were really worried, as parents would be, that their 13-year-old kid wasn't getting enough sleep. So my parents would make me turn off the TV, turn off the radio, go to bed. And I devised a master plan where I took an old transistor radio. I think most people know what that is, but if you don't, it's about the size of an iPhone. You just clicked it on and you could listen to the radio. And Brian, I put it under my pillow. So just loud enough so I could hear it, but my mom couldn't hear it. And I would fall asleep to Chick calling games. And I will call games today, and I'll hear myself say something, and I'll realize I've never heard that come out of my mouth before. And the only explanation is I'm channeling Chick. That somewhere in my head, I remember he described a play that way, and me looking for a description. And you know this from being a play-by-play guy. Sometimes plays unfold, and you're trying to explain what's happening, and it's unexplainable. Chick was great at that, and I will use a phrase like Chick used to say stuff like yo-yoing up and down when he was, talking about a guy dribbling. He would say, put him in the popcorn machine. Chick invented the phrase slam dunk. When somebody tries to get fancy and throws a behind the back pass and it goes out of bounds, Chick used to say, the mustard's off the hot dog. And I will eventually pop up and say these things, and I'll get an email or a tweet from somebody, and they'll say, I haven't heard anybody say that since I heard Chick say it in 1978. And that to me is the ultimate compliment. He to me is the best.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Completely agree with you. And I think it's so interesting to talk to play-by-play guys like yourself that followed a legend. Okay. And I did too. Now, not certainly not the level of Chick Hearn, but in the Texas Tech world, he was, and that's Jack Dale. Jack did the football broadcast for 40-something years and the basketball broadcast for 50, and I literally followed him in the football broadcast booth. And same story in that I would listen to him when I was growing up, when I was at Tech, went to school there, and pick up on a couple of things here and there. And I can tell you that what you just mentioned about people will message you if you say something and it triggers something that they had heard before. Same story here. And I love it because I do have such great respect for him, just as you do for Chick Hearn, and I think everybody in the broadcast world does for Chick. And it's just cool. It's cool when something like that does come out and somebody notices.
Well, and Chick used to do something, Brian, at the end of every Laker win where he would say that the game is ladies and gentlemen, this game is in the refrigerator. The lights are out. The butter's getting hard. The jello's jiggling. I never do Chick's whole rant, but when I have a big game, I was talking about that Kobe game earlier. If you listen to me at the end of that game, when the Lakers, who were down the entire night, win the game, I just, in a stream of consciousness, say, game's in the refrigerator.
Game in the refrigerator, and the Lakers are going to win on Kobe's last night. He's going to score 60, and I don't believe what I just saw.
So I default to some Chick phrases all the time, and people, I worry about why is Ireland copying Chick? But people love it. People say, that as long as the credit goes to the right place and people use it to remember Chick. And like on a podcast like yours today, me telling people to go to YouTube and type Chick's name in so they can hear him. I feel in a small way, guys like Bill McDonald and I are keeping Chick's legacy alive. And if I can even do that for one person, that's a good day for me. So I'm glad. Thank you for bringing him up.
Well, and it's funny because in my much littler world, I have the little phrase, it's touchdown Red Raiders. I scream it. I'm a screamer. And when I first started saying it, and it just happened, but when I first started saying it, I got tons of emails from people that said, why don't you say touchdown Texas Tech? Because that's what Jack said. And at that time, it was almost like that's sacred ground. I'm not going there. Exactly. So that's cool. Last thing before we get away, I wanted to ask you about, because you are a celebrity. When you're in Los Angeles, you're
Brian,
in that
Class D.
I know. Okay, D. Whether you I'm a Class G. So we'll go with Class D.
Fair enough.
So Class D celebrities in Los Angeles do get great opportunities to do fun things. And I just want to throw this picture up on the screen. So how good are you at basketball? You got game or?
Well, I think you played pickup with me back in the day. I have a jumper.
I did.
I have a jump shot, Brian, but that's it. That's about the only thing. This was this was a charity game we used to play in for ESPN LA, where we would take on a team of celebrities. I would normally I'd get on the score sheet, but I play no defense. As one of my friends like to joke, my favorite move is fake to the open man and shoot, which is the opposite of what any coach will tell you. All you got to do is hit the open man. Mike D'Antoni said, guys like you have gotten me fired in every city I've ever coached in. But I finally had to give it up. Maybe, I don't know, I'm 58 now. I had to give it up probably 3 years ago because I realized I used to play Brian 3-4 days a week. And then I had to cut it to 2 days a week because I was sore. And when I started getting sore after 1 day a week, I thought, all right, it's I'm friends with a couple doctors because I work in the NBA, and they say, guys your age, guys in your 50s playing basketball built my my second house in Italy with torn ACLs and knee replacement. So I don't play. I can still shoot a little bit, but I don't play anymore. And in most of my spare time, I play a lot of bad golf. I still love to golf. I'm not great at it, but I still love playing.
All right, last question. My doppelganger back in the day was Buck Showalter. Okay. Who's your doppelganger?
The person I get the most compared to is an actor named Will Arnett.
Yep.
He's a pretty successful actor, and he's been in a lot of stuff. We have the same kind of high forehead, the same amount of hair. Brown hair, brown eyes. If you look at Will Arnett from the right angle, I get compared to him a lot. But that's about the only one. I see you got the Jimmy Neutron thing. That was something Mason. That was something Mason started. Probably Mason and I have been doing sports radio for about 25 years. He started that about 5 years in. When I would make him mad, he would go, "Listen, Jimmy Neutron," and so I kind of willingly embraced it. I think it was kind of a fun little cool thing for me. So.
Well, here, do the Jimmy Fallon thing. Just turn a little bit and see if you can make that little pose. And
like this one,
other way.
Had I known you were going to do it, I would have spiked the hair up a little higher. Give you the full Jimmy Neutron thing. But
that's funny.
I don't mind that one at all. It's better to. Hey, they could be comparing you to a lot worse people. So if it's a cartoon character, that's normally pretty safe.
So I didn't throw the picture up there because back then I had the manufactured hair. But when I was doing sports here,
totally real. You had whenever you did that. Now, when did you give it? Did you give that up after you left WFAA?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I left television, had been out of television for a few years, realized I wasn't going back to it. Thought, if I'm going to be in radio, might as well have the radio look. So decided, and plus it's a hassle. Goodness, it's a hassle.
Right, of course.
So I decided, I'm tired of the hassle. So I just went without, shaved the head, and been doing that ever since.
Well, the good news is, Brian, I like we talked about, I haven't seen you, since in person since the 90s, whenever our paths me across. And you look exactly the same, man. You have aged very, very well. Like if you went back, I think if somebody found a picture of John Ireland and Brian Jensen in the 80s in Beaumont, Texas, we would look relatively similar. Like, maybe a few pounds, but not too many. And for the most part, we would still look the same. So, that's not bad. Michael Thompson likes to joke that 90% of the guys he played in the NBA are 100 pounds heavier. So that hasn't happened to us yet. Knock on wood.
Knock on wood is right. Fortunate about that. Hey, John, this has been a blast. In fact, you mentioned we haven't seen each other in a long time. Next time you swing through Dallas, I want to make sure that we connect because this has been a lot of fun and would love to see you.
I'd love to. Hey, and good luck with this podcast. It sounds like a lot of fun. I know I'm guessing you said you had like 12 guests. I may be in the top 10. I'm not going to be presumptive and say I could crack the top 8 yet, but maybe, who knows? Maybe 2 years from now I can come back.
You're a dude that knows how it works, okay? When this thing posts, you better start posting some good comments about it, because there's some viewership on some other ones that you're going to have to get that's what's going to determine it, okay?
Right. Well, I have a lot of Twitter followers, but that's all I have. Like, I don't do Facebook or Instagram, but I'll give it a shout on Twitter and see if it helps.
Sounds perfect. All right. Hey, really appreciate it, John. Great success to you continuing on with the Lakers, and hope you guys are playing in that final game this time around.
Right back at you, my friend. Pleasure to catch up and see you, and good luck with this podcast. It looks like a lot of fun. I
appreciate it very much. And for those of you that have watched this on YouTube channel, make sure that you also tune in on our podcast channels, and tune in next time on Broadcast Booth.